Hey, welcome to Spectral Echoes, a collection of Reddit stories as told by people high as a kite. But it's Reddit, who knows, right? If you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, so you don't miss out on these awesome horror stories. Now, let's get started.
Have you ever seen a shadow in the corner of your house, or anywhere, and wondered what it was? 1. The corner of the room.
I rented a room in Manchester in my first year of university. It was a small, old room on the second floor of an old house that was divided into several rooms. The price was suspiciously cheap. Only £280 a month, including utilities. At the time I just thought, it's okay. What more can a student ask for when living alone? The landlord was a middle-aged man who was very, very quiet. He just gave me the key, gave me 3 basic instructions, things I absolutely couldn't do, and then went upstairs. To be honest, I wondered if I had done something to offend him. But no, he was like that with everyone. Back to the moving. I moved in on a cloudy, cold day, and the air in the room smelled of mold and old wood, which was really creepy. And what can I say, I felt okay, especially when I thought about the money I was saving. But life is not a dream, damn it. The first week went smoothly, but I found that the light didn't seem to be enough to reach the corner of the room. Even though the ceiling light was working normally, even though I turned on the desk lamp, the night light, or whatever light source, the far left corner of the room was still in darkness. I didn't pay much attention to it, but one time my toy ball, a gift I really liked and still carry around, it lights up and flashes, something like that. I often play with it when I have free time or my hands are itchy. Okay, laugh, I can handle it, rolled into that corner and was almost gone. But when I checked, it seemed to be working fine. The battery had just been changed last week. I was a bit skeptical, so I tried turning on the flashlight from my phone and shining it directly at it. This time, the spot seemed to light up a little, but as soon as I turned it off, everything went dark again. I convinced myself that it was a lighting effect. Maybe it was the paint on the wall, or the shadow cast by the old wooden cabinet next to it. So I ignored it. But from the second week, I started waking up around 3 a.m. every night. Even though there was no alarm, no noise, just suddenly opening my eyes. I felt a chill down my spine for no reason, and at the same time I started having trouble sleeping, as if there was something strange and scary but I couldn't put it into words. That corner of the wall, still as dark as before, not much different. But now I didn't dare to look at it anymore. I turned my desk away, trying to avoid facing it. One night, I was sitting doing homework late, around 2 a.m. When I turned off my laptop to go to sleep, I felt someone standing in the room. I turned back and didn't see anyone, but that corner seemed darker than usual. It was as if something was standing there, as tall as an adult, with its back to me, motionless, silent, not moving. I blinked, the image disappeared, nothing. I told a friend about it, although the screen-like conversation with someone made me feel much more at ease. I wasn't very good at face-to-face conversations, but if this continued, I would go crazy. Have you ever woken up at exactly 3 a.m. multiple days in a row? He raised an eyebrow and replied, his tone clearly unconcerned, you must have watched too many horror movies. Or maybe it was stress. I had the same thing last year during my exams. I hesitated and continued. The corner of my room, seems like someone is standing there. He paused for a moment and then told me to rest, turn off my phone early, and stop hanging around horror websites at midnight. I wanted to argue back but felt it was quite pointless. That was why I was hesitant to tell anyone, even my parents. They would all think I was imagining things too much. I wanted to believe it too. But things didn't stop there. I tried recording a clip of the room at night. I turned on the camera, turned on the lights, panned around, and then filmed close to that dark corner. At first, nothing was unusual. I was relieved and prepared to go to sleep. However, for some reason, I opened the video I had just recorded. When I played it back, the end of the video was grainy. And at the end of the video, there was a black shadow standing straight as if imprinted on the wall. It was clearly not the shadow of an object, but really a man. I quickly deleted the clip, not daring to watch it again. Then I covered myself with the blanket, not revealing even a little bit. The next morning was the weekend. I went to take out the trash and met the old lady on the ground floor. A woman with wrinkled skin, dull eyes, and a rather strange appearance. She was the average type of female medium you see in low-budget horror movies. However, I had a strong feeling of unease. She looked at me and asked, "Are you in room number 3? I nodded. She looked up at my window. It seemed like she wanted to say something, but then she fell silent and turned away. I tried to force a smile, but my heart started to beat very hard, restraining the thought of grabbing her, forcing her to say it all. Back in my room, I went online to look for information. There was no official news. But the more it was like that, the more uneasy I felt. I would rather have something, even rumors and innuendos, so that I could be decisive. But no, absolutely not. Suddenly, the ball, I swear I still left it neatly on the table, blocking it with 2 books, rolled down with a thud. I jumped up and didn't dare to look at that corner of the room anymore. At that moment, my nerves were as tense as a string and snapped. My intuition told me that this was not good at all. Fuck. I immediately packed up my things, hastily stuffed everything into 2 old suitcases, no need to be neat. I moved out without notice, without waiting for the morning, and without getting my deposit back. God bless, I really ran as fast as my legs could carry me without looking back even once. Until now, I still can't forget the creepy feeling and the horror when I just narrowly missed danger. I clearly remember when I opened the door, the room light suddenly went out. The whole hallway was only dimly lit. When I stepped out of the door, I told myself to look straight ahead. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw my shadow and another, taller shadow right behind me. I tried to run away from that house forever. I never told anyone about this story again for many years after. Friends, lovers, parents. That story was like something I tried to lock away, buried deep in my memory until now. Sometimes I wonder, is it because I am sensitive? Or simply thinking too much because there were basically no obvious signs. Everything was still normal and the truth was normal. But at the same time, a part of me still breathed a sigh of relief and said to myself, damn if it had been a little later.
2. Under the stairs.
I didn't think I would tell this story. I can confirm that I am not superstitious or believe in any spiritual forces. After all, if you grow up among people who rely on ghosts to make money, I think your faith will be completely eroded. However, I have encountered this situation. The house my son and I just moved to is an old house, quite far from the center. It is not isolated, but because the terrain is higher than the surrounding area, it is a bit like a small isolated island. However, other than those 2 things, there is almost nothing to complain about. It is convenient to go to school, go to work. Other amenities such as supermarkets, hospitals are all fine. In addition, for many personal reasons, this is the best place for me and my son at the moment. The house does not make any special impression, at least when viewed from the outside. However, when you enter, the space feels a bit cold and too quiet. I don't know how to describe it, but the summer weather is hot and there is always a creaking sound like being blocked when stepping through the door. Actually, I noticed this when I went to see the house with the broker. The walls were gray, the paint was peeling, and the air inside was always heavy. But I was also happy because of the coolness, and blamed it all on the fact that no one had lived in this house for a long time. The old wooden staircase, with each step worn out, made creaking sounds every time someone stepped on it. I even went up to check. Fortunately, other than this, everything was still quite good, safe enough for people to live in. And especially the empty area under the stairs. You understand, with houses built in this old style, the owner often takes advantage of the area under the stairs for storage. This space became a mini warehouse, filled with discarded objects, moldy cardboard boxes, rags and items of unknown origin. The only strange thing was that there was clearly a trace of a door here, but it was later blocked by boards with 8 clear nail marks. And then, it was opened again but much smaller, making an adult like me have to bend down to look inside. However, I didn't think much of it. My parents' house used to be like this, but it was demolished after the reconstruction. The owners probably had their reasons too. Tommy, my son, initially just saw it as a fun place to store his toys. He wasn't very active and often sat there playing with Legos all day. I started to feel uncomfortable when he hung around down there, sometimes sitting silently for hours, not even paying attention when his cousin called. He was quite close to this cousin because he was one of the few relatives of similar age. Even so, I didn't pay much attention, thinking that the 2 of them were angry with each other or something. But then I saw that the boy started to change. He talked less, played less, often sat quietly. His eyes seemed to be absorbed in something that I couldn't understand. Well, he was always quite quiet, but not to this extent. There were mornings when he and I were at home together, but he only said a few sentences to me and then ran away. I didn't believe that was normal for a 6-year-old and even asked the teachers and school counselor for advice. They said that he was still quite normal, just that he wasn't adapting well to his friends, probably due to the sudden change in environment. And in their words, It seemed like I was the one with the problem and should adjust myself to take better care of my child. Damn. I can't rely on those people at all. I admit that I was quite stressed and pressured in many ways, but it was obvious that this was not normal at all. And what worried me more was that when he turned to look at me, his eyes seemed to not be focused on me but on someone else. But then that same evening when I entered the living room, I saw my son sitting blankly facing the space under the stairs, his eyes wide open and unblinking. He didn't turn to look at me but only whispered, "Mom, he's not happy because you locked the door." I felt my heart stop. The blood in my body froze for a moment. In the morning before leaving the house, I conveniently closed the door of the warehouse. I also reminded the boy not to go in there to play too much. It was dusty and full of insects. He must have felt unhappy, so he used that imaginary friend to protest to me. However, I have to admit that I was scared out of my wits at that time. But children, who doesn't have a few unreal childhood friends, right? Right. However, I began to feel nauseous and avoided looking at the warehouse under the stairs. My anxiety grew, especially at noon almost a week later. I remember it clearly because that day coincided with my wedding day with my husband. He is now my ex-husband, but I was struggling with a pile of dishes that had not been washed for 2 days. There was a rustling sound behind me. I didn't turn around and was sure that it was the boy who had just woken up and was looking for something to eat. But no, it wasn't my son. I saw him pass by in the blink of an eye, disappearing at the foot of the stairs. My forehead was covered in cold sweat even though it was summer. I stood there for who knows how long, maybe 5 to 7 minutes, when Tommy's voice rang out from upstairs. He was always upstairs, so what was that thing just now? From then on, whenever I heard a slight noise from the bottom of the stairs, I couldn't help but think about something. As if someone was moving very quietly, not wanting to be discovered. I didn't let him near me anymore, even though I knew he still wanted to go in there. But the climax was that fall. I slipped while carrying clothes past the bottom of the stairs, right at the entrance to that warehouse. I swear to God there was nothing there, flat and completely empty. But clearly I knew I had tripped over something. Unfortunately there was nothing at all. No toys, no scattered objects, no means no. There was only a tightly closed door that seemed to tease me. This frequency repeated itself more and more, making me start to wonder if I had auditory hallucinations. There were times when my son was playing next to me. I could still hear strange clicking sounds coming from that warehouse. I told myself it was wind, mice or whatever. But the more I told myself, the more scared I became. What should I do now? Update. I sealed the door and forbade my son from playing in that warehouse, but it didn't work very well. Well, he couldn't get in, but he still hung around there like a secret game. The more I forbade him, the more he liked it. One day I woke up and saw him sitting right in front of the warehouse door, which scared the hell out of me. I wanted to move out immediately, as soon as possible.
3. Shadow in an old church.
I am not someone who easily believes in mysterious stories, legends, or supernatural phenomena. As a travel photographer, I have taken pictures in many places around the world, from ancient castles in Scotland to ancient temples in Asia. Each place I have been to has its own beauty. Of course, there is no shortage of creepy legends. But I always approach my work with reason, with a scientific and practical perspective. I don't know if it is luck or not, but I have never encountered these things in real life. However, after a business trip to an ancient church in Yorkshire, England, I could not explain what I had experienced. This church is not large, but it exudes an ancient and mysterious beauty hidden among the rolling hills. Built in the 12th century, this place carries the marks of a long history with gray stone walls, high windows, and elaborately carved arches. When I arrived, the faint light of the late afternoon shone through the large windows, creating a hazy light, making the space inside the church both majestic and cold. As soon as I entered, I felt something strange. It was not the mystery of this ancient church, but an indescribable feeling, as if the space here was somehow different. That feeling was like an invisible attraction, making me feel as if something was watching me from behind, even though I was the only one inside at that time. I began my work, standing in front of the sturdy stone pillars, trying to find the best angle to take a photo. At this time, the church was so quiet that I could hear every small sound, like my footsteps hitting the cold tile floor or the wind blowing through the cracks in the windows. However, when I entered the area near the large cross, a sudden chill came over me. It wasn't like a wind blowing, but a cold feeling that permeated every fiber of my being, as if a sudden blast of icy air had come from somewhere and enveloped me. I was startled, but then I reassured myself that maybe I hadn't adapted to the weather yet. I had just flown back from a tropical country in Southeast Asia and had caught a cold. At that moment, I just wanted to take a quick photo and then go back to the hotel to rest. I continued my work. I picked up the camera, adjusted the settings, and started taking pictures of the details in the church. The pictures I took at this time were all ordinary. The colored windows, the paintings on the walls, the intricately patterned stone columns. I was starting to feel like I was getting used to the space, but the cold still did not let me go. When I looked back at the pictures I had just taken, I couldn't help but be startled. In one of the pictures, right under the large cross in the middle of the church, I saw a faint black shadow appear. At first, I was startled, thinking that there was a problem with the lens, and quickly checked. But fortunately, it was fine. Then I thought it was a strange lighting effect. However, when I looked closely, I realized that the black shadow was unlike any lighting effect I had ever encountered. It was stationary, not moving, and its shape was difficult to guess. At that moment, I felt a strange presence, as if someone was standing right behind me, watching me. I couldn't explain it. I turned around and looked around the church. There was no one in the room. I was alone. There was no one around and no one else. But the shadow was clearly there in the photo. I tried taking a few more shots, and it never appeared again. Even so, I still felt a chill rising in my body. It was like an inexplicable, indelible figure that lingered in every photo I took. In a state of confusion, I decided to go outside to get some fresh air and calm down. However, when I came back, the cold and haunting feeling still did not go away. I couldn't understand why there was such a shadow that clearly appeared in the photo that I definitely didn't see when I took the photo. I began to worry, wondering if I was hallucinating or if something strange was happening in that church. After that day, I never went back to that church again. Partly because I was avoiding it, but also because I had enough material. But when I looked at the photos again, that strange feeling returned. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me from the shadows of the church. Even though I had left, that shadow still followed me. Every time I recalled that trip, that shadow appeared in my mind as something inexplicable, but very real. I couldn't forget the strange feeling in that old church. Maybe it was just a coincidence, a lighting effect that I couldn't explain. But I also couldn't shake the feeling that there was something beyond human understanding, something lurking in the darkness, waiting for a moment to reveal itself.
4. Black shadow in camera.
I don't know why I still remember this so clearly, when everything happened in just over a month. Nothing was too clear, no one said anything specific, and I myself was not sure what I saw. But every time I accidentally turned on the camera to watch my baby sleep, or saw the curtains swaying gently on windless evenings, everything came back to me, detailed and real like a documentary. I don't know why I still remember this so clearly, when everything happened in just over a month. Nothing was too clear, no one said anything specific, and I myself was not sure what I saw. But every time I accidentally turned on the camera to watch my baby sleep, or saw the curtains swaying gently on windless evenings, everything came back to me, detailed and real like a documentary. I thought it was the curtain flying. Even though the window was closed that day, and there was no draft in my house, I still thought it could be air pressure or wind from some unknown gap. Or maybe the camera was faulty. Cheap ones often have light interference, especially at night. I didn't say anything to my wife. I didn't look at it again. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't think it was necessary. Such things are not strange. I was tired, the light, the camera, there were hundreds of reasons why things weren't clear. But it seemed that after that time, I started to pay attention to smaller things. There were mornings when I saw faint marks on the wall near my baby's crib, like handprints. I didn't know if it was dust or dirt, just a few specks as if someone had pressed their hand against the wall. What made me a little confused was that the marks seemed smaller than an adult's hand, but they couldn't have been from a newborn, because my baby at that time didn't know how to roll over, just lying in one place all day. And actually, I didn't think it was a handprint, but just a dirty smudge. I was sure that my wife was standing nearby, or that I was the one who made the mess while cleaning up and forgot. In general, I took a towel to wipe it away, and didn't think anything more about it. Another night, I checked the camera again, not sure why, maybe because the baby moved and the camera alerted, or I couldn't sleep. It was around 3 a.m., and this time I saw a shadow standing in the corner of the room. Not a clear shadow, not a person. Just something that looked like a person standing still next to the toy cabinet, where the camera looked out was just dark. I rewound it. It was still there, not moving, not disappearing immediately like the previous times. But I wasn't sure what I saw either. The screen was black and white. The infrared light was dim, not sharp, not clear. If someone asked me if I was sure I saw a person, I really wasn't sure. It could have been the shadow of a clothes hanger or the shirt bulging from the light wind. It could have been interference with my phone at the time. I really didn't know. I rushed to the baby's room, and he was still sleeping soundly. Thank God. After confirming that there was no problem, I returned to the room with my wife. My wife was awakened by my actions. She asked if there was anything, but I said no almost immediately. She nodded and fell asleep, and I tossed and turned for the rest of the night. Fortunately, the phone didn't ring again, and I felt that my decision not to tell her was the right one. She had enough problems already. She didn't need another one. The next few days went normally. I still didn't tell my wife anything. It wasn't until the 5th day that I took the initiative to suggest, why don't we go back to my parents' house to live for a while? My grandparents had expressed that they wanted to be near their grandchild for a while, so it would be less tiring for both of us. Besides, my parents' house has a large, airy garden, which would be good for our baby. In general, I had prepared 101 reasons to convince my wife, but my wife immediately agreed. Maybe she wanted a change of pace, or maybe I was talking a little strangely, so she felt something. We moved back to my parents' house not long after that. I deleted the camera app on my phone. Not because I was scared, but because I didn't want to see anything again. I didn't keep any clips, didn't take screenshots, didn't save anything. Partly because the images were too blurry to show anyone, and partly because I didn't want to face them again. I had no proof, and I wasn't sure if there was anything worth finding out. The next few days went normally. I still didn't tell my wife anything. It wasn't until the 5th day that I took the initiative to suggest, why don't we go back to my parents' house to live for a while? My grandparents had expressed that they wanted to be near their grandchild for a while, so it would be less tiring for both of us. Besides, my parents' house has a large, airy garden, which would be good for our baby. In general, I had prepared 101 reasons to convince my wife, but my wife immediately agreed. Maybe she wanted a change of pace, or maybe I was talking a little strangely, so she felt something. We moved back to my parents' house not long after that. I deleted the camera app on my phone. Not because I was scared, but because I didn't want to see anything again. I didn't keep any clips, didn't take screenshots, didn't save anything. Partly because the images were too blurry to show anyone, and partly because I didn't want to face them again. I had no proof, and I wasn't sure if there was anything worth finding out.
Shadow in camera. 5 coffee shop. Table 7.
I used to work as a waiter in a small cafe deep in an old street in Ashford, the kind of old cafe where everything from the light to the air seemed as dim as the dust on the glass. The tables and chairs were dark wood, old but sturdy, the yellow lights hung high, the music played from a speaker close to the ceiling, sometimes on, sometimes off, and the customers were mostly quiet, rarely talking, as if they didn't want to disturb the old atmosphere in the cafe. I worked the afternoon to evening shift, gradually getting used to the job, also getting used to the customers' habits. Some people always chose to sit by the window, some only chose tables near the counter. Some people absolutely never sat with their backs to the door. I didn't question it, everyone had their own way of sitting. But I started to notice a table placed in the deepest corner of the cafe. table number 7. It was near the rough brick wall, right under a hanging plant that no one in the cafe could remember when it was there. It didn't seem like anything special, but I noticed that people sitting there rarely stayed long. Usually after 10 or 15 minutes, they would stand up, pay, and leave, often leaving almost an entire glass of water. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was because the light in that corner was weaker, maybe it was because the place smelled slightly damp, or maybe it was just that I felt uncomfortable sitting too deep in a closed corner. I even made up stories about spies, intelligence, or the mafia, exchanging secret information like in TV dramas. That was how I entertained myself between my boring job and dull life. But that was it. Things only started to get strange one rainy evening. That day, the shop was very empty. The sky was gloomy outside, and because my legs were too tired after many hours of standing, I sat down at table number 7 to rest for a while. At that time, I didn't pay attention to where I was sitting. I just chose the most hidden place to avoid being seen by the manager because the rule was that employees were not allowed to sit during working hours. Only when I raised my head and looked around did I realize that position. The feeling at that time was unclear, just a little cold. Maybe because of the rain, or maybe because the air in that corner was thicker than the others. I left that place after only a few minutes, and everything continued as usual. But since then, every time I passed by table number 7, I had a strange feeling. Not fear in the usual sense, but a very specific feeling that I seemed to be still sitting there. Whether I was standing at the counter, carrying water, or talking to a customer, just a glance at that corner of the table always made me feel as if I had never fully stood up from that place. It's hard to explain, and I don't know what to call it. Once, I saw my reflection in the glass door. It was a thick layer of glass, covered in steam, and the light from the street made the image in it always not really sharp. In that moment, I saw the silhouette of someone sitting with their back to table number 7. That sitting position, the shoulders slightly leaning forward, the way I sit when I'm tired. But when I looked straight at the table, there was no one. No movement, no sound, just an empty chair neatly placed at the table. I didn't tell anyone about it. Not because I was afraid of suspicion, but because I didn't know what I had seen. Maybe it was the reflection. Maybe the glasses were old and warped. Maybe I was tired, and my imagination filled in the gaps in my perception. But after that, I didn't go near the area on my own. If I had to clean up, I waited for a colleague to come with me. If a customer was sitting there, I avoided looking in that direction for too long. Another time, I raised my hand from the counter to show a new customer where I was, and happened to catch a glimpse of myself in the glass door. To my surprise, the reflection didn't quite match my movements. For a brief moment, it was still, or it seemed to be a beat behind me. It happened too quickly to be sure, but it made me pull my hand away immediately, and from then on, I never looked directly at that glass again. I quit after a few months, not for any specific reason. I just felt like I needed another job that was more suitable. I don't attribute what I saw to anything spiritual, but I also don't completely dismiss the possibility that something happened beyond my understanding. I haven't been back to the shop since. I don't intend to stay away from it. I just don't think about it much anymore. It's just that sometimes when I think back, I still don't know for sure what happened. Maybe it was all just a coincidence, some vague experience. Maybe it was the light, the rain, the thick glass, I was tired and lack of sleep. Or maybe it was because I really sat in one place for too long when I shouldn't have. But if that were so, then I don't know why the image of the reflection in the glass, sitting so much like me, keeps repeating itself in my head. I'm not sure what that means, or if it means anything at all, right?
If you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on these awesome horror stories.